Hey folks, welcome to Verified Investing. My name is Gareth Soloway, Chief Market Strategist here. In today's video, we're going to look at gold, silver, platinum, and palladium. Gold has now confirmed above its parallel channel. The question is, where is its next stop? Where is it ultimately going? The momentum in gold is something that, again, historically has not happened very often. This is an incredible period for the precious metal. Now, silver never confirmed above its key trend line going back to 1980, touching 2011. And actually, palladium finally tagged an upside resistance today. So we'll look at all of this, including platinum. But let's start out with gold, which is obviously the biggest player out there. So here's your parallel. And this is again from the beginning of 2025, your first move up, your consolidation digestion period, back to the parallel here, the trend line, and then the next wave up. Notice how this high, we came up right there, we got rejected, and then it just blew right through, closed above, confirmed, and continuing. Now, ultimately, this means that this trend line becomes support at around 4,060 on gold should it pull back. All right, so that's something we'll be watching very closely. But the question is, what method do we use now to look for upside near-term resistance? And listen, let's be fair. I'm still a huge believer in gold that it's going to 5,000, then to 6,000, and maybe even beyond that in this cycle. But cycles, even during them, they have pullbacks during these bull cycles. So we have to just be cognizant of that and look to see where that begins. Now, one headline that I saw today is the RSI is now the highest it has ever been on gold. So RSI is relative strength index. Basically, it shows you that it is extreme in terms of being overbought. Just looking at the chart, I think we can all see that, at least in the near term. So it does lead me to believe that there is a pullback coming. The question is at what price point? So let's get rid of this, and I want to show you something that I found out here. So if we look at the chart on gold, and we take the beginning of the bull run starting in 2025 to the high in April, what is the distance of that move? And what we do here is we bring it right up there. And basically, it's $918, right? And so the idea is that after the consolidation, what's called a measured move would occur, where from the beginning of this move, it should essentially go up at least $918. And so what we can do is we take this and we bring it over here and put it right to that beginning point. And when you do that, look at what you get. We're basically knocking on the door of this level around 42.35, which again would be a measured move on the chart. So it basically, my point being is that the distance of the move that began this latest bull move that started in 2025, we would now at that level, if we touch that level, have been replicated that move from the second move up of equal magnitude. Essentially, it would be equal to this first move. Now, this is just one method in overall technical analysis. And again, one of the interesting things about it is that it's essentially looking at charts and recognizing that human nature, human psychology is why things go up and down. People are bullish and emotionally, greedy in a way, or just believing that it goes up, or they're getting fearful and they're selling and it's coming down. And so it's really all based on human emotion, which means subconsciously, we always want to make order out of chaos. And that's where the idea of measured moves come in, where they can help guide you to where there could be some resistance on gold. And just to show you this is a pretty cool thing, is what you can see here is you have this kind of similar move here, and then a lot of consolidation in 2024. And in the second half of 2024, we went up again. And I want to show you this, guys, because this is pretty darn cool. So if we take this, the distance to this first move, right? So this low, you can see it started to move up and just continued up along the way. If we take that and we say, okay, well, here's all this consolidation. Here was where you started to go up, and we just stretch this out, right? Let's just bring it out. Look at that. It virtually is identical in terms. So in other words, this distance here essentially was a measured move with this move here. So this move up, there's your consolidation. We can see this inside bar consolidation period. And then the next bull move is almost identical in terms of height to this one. Now, time-wise, it's different, right? This one took a little longer. This one was a little shorter. In this case, this one was a little bit longer. This one's a little bit shorter. But the point being is the distance is ultimately the same. And so when all is said and done, for me, I'm going to keep a close eye in the next 24 to 48 hours on the 42 35 level, which is just above the highs of the day. Maybe we hit it overnight. And then what I want to do is essentially just monitor that. We know the RSI is at all-time highs, basically. Again, relative strength is overbought to the extreme. Again, keep in mind, RSI being extreme doesn't necessarily mean it's going to correct, but it does just give us another signal that says, okay, the trade is probably getting a little long in the tooth in the near term. Okay. And then the idea is, well, how much could we pull back? Right. And one of the interesting things here when we're looking at gold, we could very easily say, okay, well, in the past, before we had these moves, I mean, what was the drawdown? And what we see here from this high to this low, this was a pullback. All right. Remember, this is the measured move, right? So you had the move starting in 2025 up, and then we had the drawdown of about 10 to 11%. And then we've had this secondary move where the measured move is literally right there. Same distance from here to here, same distance from there to there. And essentially what's interesting about that is in the past, you have the same sort of thing, right? So we just looked at from here to here. And then what was your drawdown before we had our next move up, which basically was a measured move from here to here. And to do that, we could do the same thing, right? We measure it and bring it down. And this one's a little bit on the lower side, right? It's about 7%. And so it just gives us a guideline of basically telling me as a trader to expect a pullback between 7 and 11%. If we average that, it would be a 9% pullback on gold of what I'd be looking for. And again, it doesn't mean gold won't go down 10%, maybe even 11 or 12, or maybe only 7%. But the idea is, as a technician, we want to figure out what the general guideline is, because then it gives us something to shoot for. We don't get our crazy expectations if we're shorting gold that gold's going to pull back 30%. I think that's a little for all of us, most of us, that would be a little outlandish, certainly for me. At the same time, we also don't think, hey, listen, I'm going to wait for a 2% pullback and then buy gold, right? It gives us a zone, let's say 9% or 7 to 11%, where we can say, okay, it's now pulled back this amount. This matches the general corrections of past measured moves, and we can look at this as a signal. So again, these little things, I always try to bring forward new ideas, the measured move, looking at the pullbacks of these measured move to guide us to what we can expect when gold pulls back. And again, it's not to say that gold will pull back at the measured move level coming up at 42.35, but again, the odds at some point are going to favor some sort of correction here on gold. It's getting a little crazy. It is. All right, silver. Silver, we have this trend line here. Pivot high from 1980 to pivot high from 2011. I flipped over to the weekly chart, just a heads up. That's what we're on. We did, on the daily chart, we closed above it right here. So going back to the daily chart, there's your close above it. We did not confirm. Today would confirm, if we close up here, a break of this trend line. And again, you can see we hit it here and had this big reversal. I did trade it. I'm glad I got out with my members of Smart Money Commodities for a simple gain of just 5%. 5% intraday pullback. I pulled the ripcord on that. Now I have reshorted it up here, but the fact that it's looking like it's going to confirm, you know, it's kind of like, okay, do I want to stick with that, or do I want to just wait and reshort it at a higher level? Now, looking at where that higher level could be, this is where things get a little bit more interesting, right? So what we can do is we can start doing a parallel channel as well. And to do that, what we do is we want to say, okay, well, here's a trend line, right? Here's a trend line, right? And you might say, well, why is that a trend line? Well, because look, it's a beauty. Low pivot aligns perfectly with this. You pierced it, but then held. Then you hammered it, and went into parabolic mode. And so what we want to do now is we want to say, okay, well, number one, let's bring it up here. And this is pretty interesting too. Look, high, highs, highs, and kisses it, and then broke out. And then look at how it consolidated right above before blasting up. So this does tell us this trend line, or this parallel has teeth. And so what we then want to do is we want to say, okay, well, where do we go back to on this? I mean, essentially, how far? I mean, like what up here kind of aligns with this level? And to me, what I want to do is I want to just bring it all the way back here and say, okay, let's move this up. What do we get if we bring this up a little bit higher, right? Is that a level to monitor? And again, we could bring that down just a tiny bit. And this is starting to be where we now start to see high pivot and high pivot. And we do look, and I've talked about this before to you guys. If you've been following me for a while, you know, I've basically guided you guys to, you know, $60 to $62 is that next big level. And part of that is just coming from this zone here, right? And again, one of the interesting things, again, is we can bring it really further back. Even this would almost make more sense. In fact, that's even better. Look at how I'm adjusting it on the fly, folks. So look, pivot low to pivot low, and then look high, high or low, and it stair steps along this, and then it broke into that. So that to me, and again, this is right up there at that $60 to $62 per ounce level on silver. That to me looks very keen as where we could go. And again, it makes sense, right? And this is part of it too. It's part of a science and an art in that you want to look at it and say, okay, well, does this work better? Does that work better? Does this trend line hit? How many times? How many times does it hit? The more times, the better. The more times, even from each side, because it shows you if it stops on each side that it has teeth, that trend line. And so, really, what we're looking at here is we have this area, this area, this area, and then right in here, and then just above it there as well. Then we broke down, we continued to fall down, and then you take the low here in 2025, kisses it here, and touches it there. And so the idea is if silver surges up, this now becomes an obvious level with an alignment here of where we should have resistance. And again, that's around $60 to $62 per ounce on silver. So with confirmation, listen, there's always a chance we could reverse, but odds are now starting to favor a continued up move on silver, potentially to that $60 to $62 level. Now, looking at platinum, platinum's kind of stalled out here. And it's not to say it can't go up. It has not achieved my upside target yet on platinum. You can see one of my levels here is right through these highs in 2012. And so these huge high pivots, that's kind of the logical zone where platinum should go. And you can see this was a great former trend line. You can see a high pivot, high pivot, high pivot. And then look, here it is, closed above, confirmed, and has continued to move up. So it's a classic breakout. Now we're looking at resistance around $1,730 to $35 as good resistance. So let's keep our eyes on that, folks, and kind of keep it on our radar. But that's what I'm seeing on platinum. So again, if silver continues up, which if it confirms the odds start to sway that way, then platinum should move up and it should at least touch this 1735 level. Now it gets a little more tricky with palladium. Palladium, I have a zone here of resistance, this low pivot from 2021. And then you can see how these highs were right there. And so this really gives us a zone. And you can see today that palladium pierced it. Now it could easily go back up here. So if platinum and the rest of the group silver go up, maybe it does push up, but at least it's now starting to touch this zone of resistance on palladium. And there's been an amazing mover. By the way, guys, just look at this longer term trend line here and look at the breakout, retrace, pop, retrace, and then off to the races. It's a great example of resistance. So back here was support, right? Support, support, support. And then as it comes down here, it comes down, breaks, resistance, resistance, and then breaks back above. And this is, by the way, this is what I mean by when I talked about earlier, how a trend line shows its relative strength when it can basically show you from both sides that it has teeth. So here we very clearly see support and support and support, and then resistance, resistance, and then back to support and support. It shows you multiple times on each side that it goes back and forth. So really some interesting stuff there. But nonetheless, gold flipping back to gold. Let's watch and see where this plant pans out. Incredible move. Just to show you in percentage terms, this is the daily chart. Just this most recent move, that is what I'm including in the measured move, to today's high, a 27% move in gold. And that again, folks, put this in perspective. Gold 7% since August 20th. 2 months. August 20th to September 20th. And today is October 15th. So not even 2 months. 27% in gold. That is incredible. I mean, there's really no words to even describe it. It just is incredible. So here's my latest analysis. As always, I want to keep you guys informed on what I'm looking at. Keep an eye on the measured move on gold. Let's watch silver. It looks like it'll confirm today. Is it going to push up towards $60 to $62? We'll keep an eye on that. And then keep an eye on platinum, maybe one more move up into that resistance. And palladium's kind of in this gray area. Touch the low end of the target. Still could push up into the meat and potatoes of that that channel there of resistance. Let's watch and see. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.